Gillian Bavin Mizzi is an Australian historian writing cold case narrative nonfiction. She worked as a lecturer at Murdoch University for nearly 10 years, publishing a number of academic works in the field of late 19th century sexual assault cases. Over time, she became increasingly interested in cold cases and published her first true crime book in 2021. In the case of Scotland's Bible John murders, she goes back to events that happened decades ago with an engaging and captivating writing style that ranges from historical reconstruction to interviews and analyzing hundreds of documents from an endless bibliography. She offers a compelling and original theory in her new published book, Bible John, A New Suspect. Gillian is now connected with us as our special guest to this new episode of Conoscere TV. Hi, Jill, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Ginevra. Hello.
Welcome to Conoscere TV, and thank you for accepting our invitation. So, what motivated you in first instance to revisit the Bible John case, and how did you approach your research differently from previous investigations and publications on this topic?
I was particularly interested in the Bible John cases, Ginevra, because there was so much information available. So much was known about the killer. And the cases themselves are very unusual. The killer had a very distinctive pattern. He was interested in young mothers, and he was interested with women who were menstruating at the time. And I found that fascinating. I wondered how he knew they were menstruating and why it was important that they were menstruating. And in terms of the difference for me as to other writers, most people who write about cold cases are ex-police officers or journalists. I wondered all along whether an historian could bring different tools and different understandings to cold cases. Cold cases are by their very nature historical. They're cases from a long time ago that people couldn't solve. And I knew that I had sources I would use that would be different from anyone else. Sources like the Education Department records, the Divorce Court records, all sorts of things like that.
In your book, you mention uncovering new evidence and suspects. Could you let us know what is the most significant piece of information that really shifts the narrative?
Absolutely. As I said, I used historical sources. I didn't approach this case with anyone in mind. I had absolutely no idea who Bible John really was. So it wasn't as though I was looking at a suspect and saying, oh, I think this person's going to fit the bill, and then I found the evidence that would prove that. I worked the other way around. So I was very aware that there was a case of a person, not a killer, who had actually been a suspect. He had been dug up and they'd done genetic testing before then on his brother and sister. The case was so close, that's why they dug him up. So I knew that the killer was very likely genetically linked. And as an historian, I started with genealogy. But again, I went with only the idea that this person is very likely linked. So somewhere up that line, I might find a link to the killer. I came across a name that the killer himself had used on the night of the third murder, the name John Templeton. He had said Templeton, Sempleson or Emerson. And when I came across John Templeton in the family tree, I thought, you've got to be joking. He's used his real name. And who would do that? I mean, it never occurred to me, and it probably should have, because I'd already researched the crimes and I'd realised by then that the killer didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't do anything immoral. Guess what? He didn't lie. So he was a moralist, not necessarily religious, but a moralist nonetheless. So then my field of study narrowed and I became very interested in anyone born in that right time period named John Templeton. But of course, I didn't know what any of them looked like. So the important thing for me was that I had approached it differently. I didn't start with a suspect. I ended with a suspect. And I didn't know what my John Templeton looked like until the very end of my research when his ex-wife handed me a photograph. That was the first time I saw what he looked like. And that is what's on the front cover of the book. That photograph that shows quite clearly the similarities. And that was after endless years of research to finally come to that breakthrough point when I realised what he looked like and that it was him.
And that was another question. You just gave me a hint because I wanted to ask you, how did your collaboration with other experts in fields like genealogy and forensic science influence your perspective on the case? And what new insight did their contribution bring to your investigation?
Yes. So there were, initially with the investigation, I thought the police were brilliant, very good. And I thought that the forensic psychiatrists on the case were brilliant. So, of course, I looked at all of their material as historical information. But in the here and now, once I got that photograph, of course, I went straight to a dentist I knew very well. I've got help with that. I have another person that I went to for help with genealogy and his understanding. He has a PhD in the sciences, particularly the biological sciences. So he explained to me a lot about genetics so that I would be able to do the family tree and understand what I was seeing. My difficulty was that I had to go so far back, which was not only difficult with the historical records, but I wanted to know that the traits that we knew about the ancestors could have carried all the way through to the time of Bible John. And he was particularly helpful with that.
Wonderful. Jill, I would leave the rest to the reading of your book. So for now, thank you very much for this chat, for your time, and we want to wish you best luck with your book.
Thank you very much, Nevra, and I've been incredibly happy with the publishing. Thank you very much.
Cold cases are, by their very nature, historical, and yet crime narrative nonfiction is almost always written by retired detectives, reporters, and criminologists. While genealogy is beginning to be recognized as a viable tool, there is so much more that historians have to offer. The author is convinced that historians can bring a different skill set to cold case investigation, taking her on a hunt for a serial killer. Bible John, a New Suspect by Gillian Bavin Mizzi is now available in bookstores and digital platforms. It's a publication by Eurobox.